For most of history, power followed a simple rule. If you wanted to rule the world, you needed land. Land meant farms. Farms meant peasants, and peasants meant armies. Power was heavy. It was built on soil and stone. Venice totally flipped the script. No king, no farmland. It had no knights to guard its borders. It was just mud and salt water. It was built on wooden piles driven into a lagoon. Yet, for centuries, emperors and kings depended on Venice. They did not need Venice for soldiers. They needed Venice for something much more dangerous. They needed money. They did not just need gold coins. They needed a system of trust. Venice invented this system. Venice did not conquer the world. It financed the world. In the process, it built the financial system we still use today. Today we are looking at how a swamp became a bank. To understand how Venice became powerful, you have to understand how strange it was. Most of Europe used the feudal system. Power came from the land. If you've controlled land, you controlled people. If you controlled people, you could collect taxes. Venice could not play that game. It sat on a lagoon with many small islands. The water was too shallow for big enemy ships, but the land was too wet for farming. There were no fields to tax. There were no castles to defend. The old system did not work here. So Venice did something different. Instead of building power on land, it built power on movement. From the beginning, Venice survived by connecting different economies. Goods came from the Islamic world, Asia, and China. They all passed through Venetian hands. The city became a bridge between worlds. These worlds did not trust each other. They did not share religions. They did not use the same money. That made Venice valuable. But what happened next made them dangerous. Early on, Venice belonged to the Byzantine Empire, but in the year 1082, everything changed. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios was in trouble. He was fighting enemies and needed a navy. Venice had a navy, so they made a deal. Venice provided the ships. In exchange, the emperor gave Venice a special right. He let them trade across the empire without paying taxes. This was not just a tax break. It was a monopoly. Other merchants had to pay high taxes. Venetians paid zero. From that moment, Venice stopped being a servant. It became a partner. They realized something important. If you control the flow of money, you do not need to be the king. You just need to own the king. This created a society that was very different from the rest of Europe. In places like France or England, merchants were low class. Real power belonged to nobles who knew how to fight. In Venice, the merchants were the government. There were no land-owning nobles. The people who owned the ships wrote the laws. This system became permanent in 1297. This event was called the closing of the Great Council. They locked the doors of power. Only families who were already in the government could stay in. Power stayed in the family. But it was not about royal blood. It was about business. These men were merchants first. They ran the state like a company. They did not care about glory. They cared about safety and profit. To protect their profit, they invented two things that changed history. In the rest of Europe, kings borrowed money for war. If the king lost the war, he often refused to pay it back. The lenders lost everything. Venice did the opposite. When the state needed money, it did not beg. It forced rich citizens to give loans called Prestiti. On paper, this looked like a tax, but there was a trick. The state paid regular interest on these loans. Also, you could sell these loans to other people. Venice had invented the government bond market. Suddenly, the rich citizens were not just subjects. They were investors. If Venice failed, they lost their money. If Venice succeeded, they got paid 5% a year. This made the rich people want the state to survive. In 1587, they launched the Banco di Rialto, making gold transfers faster. It was risky, so they kept the cash away from the metal. You put your gold in the bank wrote your name and the amount in a book. Merchants could pay debts by changing the numbers in the book. Virtual cash existed long before computers. Sounds dull, right? But back then, it was magic. It made business in Venice fast and safe. The product they were selling was trust, but systems built on safety have a problem. They hate change. Venice grew rich. Its leaders stopped taking risks. They wanted to keep their money safe. They did not want to try new things. Trade routes moved to the Atlantic Ocean. Venice stayed in the Mediterranean. The safety that made them powerful also made them stuck. They had a perfect system for a world that was disappearing. Napoleon conquered Venice in 1797, but the fight was already over. The city was just a museum of its past. Venice died as an empire, but its ideas survived. The system they built moved to other places. It moved to Amsterdam, then it moved to London. Finally, it moved to New York. The system uses state debt to run the economy. It treats money as a number in a ledger. We are still living in the house that Venice built, but we should remember how their story ended. Empires do not always fall because they run out of money. Sometimes they fall because they stop changing. They fall when they care more about the past than the future. Venice turned trust into an empire, but even trust eventually runs out. If you want to understand the future of money, you have to understand the past. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next video.